today on to this episode of Rare, we welcome Claudia Coscia onto the blog. So welcome, Claudia.
Hello,
Claudia,
everybody. Nice to meet you.
Claudia is the country manager of Italy at Kyowa Kirin. And Kyowa Kirin is a global pharmaceutical company headquartered in Japan. And their aim is to contribute to the health and well-being through development and marketing of innovative medicines worldwide. And Kyowa Kirin Italia focuses on activities mainly for therapies to support cancer patients and rare diseases. So for this episode of Rare, we are focusing on the topic of transition from pediatric to adult care. So welcome, Claudia. So why are we talking about transition today?
Thank you, Laura. Transition from pediatric to adult care is a crucial aspect for adolescents with rare and chronic diseases. Rare diseases are often serious chronic conditions that begin in childhood and are associated with potential permanent disabilities. Fortunately, the life expectancies of patients has increased overall in the recent years, thanks to the advances in research, improved pathophysiological knowledge, and the development of new treatments and diagnostics methods. This means that today, many children with serious rare diseases reach adulthood. Adolescence is a complex phase because this transition happens through this very delicate phase of life, which is adolescence. And many studies document that it is precisely in adolescence that there is a high risk of children with chronic diseases skipping regular checkups and neglecting treatment with the risk of even serious complications. This is why I believe the transition, understood as the transition of care from a pediatric patient to care of adults, is an health priority, especially in rare diseases.
Yeah, so what are the reasons that make the transition from pediatrician to adult doctor so difficult?
I think that there are many reasons. I think that one of the main one is due to the disorientation of finding oneself in the middle ground when it comes to healthcare. The type of care offered in pediatric age is profoundly different from the one of the adult, since the pediatric patient requires the support of his or her families, of caregivers, both at clinical level and in decision making, while the adult patient is considered to be an autonomous, independent individual capable of self-management. And sometimes in rare diseases, this is not really the reality. Each of these steps is characterized by critical issues. For example, one transitions from dependent child to independent adult, and in the phase of patient undergoes profound clinical, but also cultural and social changes. We all know the impact of adolescence in the development of each individual, not only from a physiological, but also social and mental point of view. Patients' personal and clinical needs also change, and it becomes necessary to receive age-appropriate medical care. In addition, the families play a key role. So family who had long been involved in care and have assumed the burden of the decision-making and implementation of many care activities find it particularly difficult. And sometimes they feel a little bit lost because they don't feel recognized in the future to continue to be part of this decision-making process. Transition brings also a lot of changes of interlocutors, those with whom a relationship of trust has been established in the past and for a long time must be left behind, and the physician and the patients and the family has to be a new relationship, a new trust from a clinical but also human point of view. Often, moreover, these interlocutors cannot be found since adult medicine has not acquired adequate experience in dealing with rare disease, which is more common in pediatric. Not least, suitable environment must be found where patients are managed. In addition, in rare diseases, it is even more difficult to find the disease expert, There is a lack of common guidelines or PDTA, and the differences in the patient management. There are also affective bonds between the pediatric team, their family, and the patients. And these affective bonds are lost in the direction of creating new affective bonds with the new interlocutors, on which we need, and the patient needed to create a new trust from a human and from a clinical point of view. So I think that all these reasons contribute to make this phase and this process quite complicated and not always optimal or in line with the family, patients, and physician expectations.
Mm-hmm. And so, Claudia, you mentioned that the process of acquiring independence for people with rare diseases is even more difficult. So why is this?
I think that the profiles of rare disease are much more heterogeneous and dynamic than the chronicity assessed by the adult doctors. So there was a need, and there is a need for ad hoc training. In fact, for effective care, it is indispensable that not only the pediatrician, but also the adult doctor knows the natural history of the pathology and the natural history of the patient himself or herself. And it's important to assess the intrinsic peculiarity and the biological complexity of a sick person affected by a rare disease. Added to this, it is necessary experience in managing the great variability of cognitive and functional phenotypes and the social context where a rare disease patient is obliged to live and evolve throughout his entire life.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think needs to be done?
I think many things, and I know that there are important projects carried out by scientific society, by the national health system, but I think that the transition process must start early, around the age of 12 years old, and needed to be gradual, progressive, and well planned by all the interlocutors, involving the educational aspects, the family, the organization around the patients, and the entire therapeutic assistance aspects. Dedicated spaces are ideally needed, called, for example, transitional clinics or structure, run jointly by the pediatrician and the adult specialist for the purpose of sharing news and protocols and on sharing the details of the patients affected by a rare disease. Family pediatrician and general practitioner must also be involved at a territorial level. The management of the transition from pediatrician to GPs should not be only an administrative and bureaucratic event, and recently it tends to be that. We think that transition, a dedicated environment and spaces for the clinical management of this delicate phase to avoid the heavy pathophysiological impacts on the patient and to guarantee the best possible care throughout the life is essential. The constant organization of meeting and consensus by scientific society and transversal meeting between specialists dedicated to the different ages for an up-to-date definition of common diagnostic therapeutic paths and guidelines are essential too. I think that the development of transitional plan, anticipate the future needs, celebrate the transition with gradual appointments of dedicated roles and profiles which are critical to the management of these patients is really important, and is critical the involvement of families also. Finally, I think that one of the Kiowa Kirin mission is to make people smile, and I think that the appropriate management of the transition is absolutely in the direction to support these key objectives for our company.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And thank you so much, Claudia, for joining us today and for talking about something that is clearly so important and raising that awareness. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.